Hey everybody, what's going on? It's Dean Meadows for the Daily Apologist Podcast, and I am super excited to start this new series called When the Atheist YouTuber Comes to Town. Over the next several weeks, I'll be interviewing some of my dearest friends who happen to be atheist YouTube content creators. We're going to talk about their background, their deconversion, and arguments for the existence of God, the ones they find most convincing and the ones they find least convincing. And then we'll ask the question, hey, what would it take for you to either become a Christian or come back to Christianity? Today's episode, I start off the series with a dear friend of mine named Ethan Micheal, host of Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. Thank you. Hope you enjoy, and God bless. Ethan Micheal, what's going on, man? It's great to have you here on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, just for all the viewers out there, Ethan runs like 50 billion YouTube channels. So I'll go ahead and ask him first, hey, for those of us who may not know you, who are you? What's your background? Did you start out as religious, or have you always been non-religious? Give us your background.
Sure. Well, I am your friendly neighborhood atheist, and you could find me on youtube.com/YFNAtheist. I also run a minor news channel, youtube.com/YFNA News, and a romantic/dating YouTube channel, Table for Two. We don't have a custom URL for that yet, but it's with my co-host Holly and I, and we do more appropriate adult content, which I think is entertaining. And people enjoy listening to. They can call into the show and get advice on relationships. I have no formal background in education or any type of extreme background in religion. I did grow up in a Christian household. I did go to a Catholic junior high for 3 years, and no, despite popular belief, that is not what made me an atheist. I, in fact, loved my experience there. I really did. I have nothing but positive things to say about my time at that Catholic school. So I was one of the lucky ones. I really remained Christian throughout the entirety of my life, although I wasn't someone that regularly went to church. If I'm being completely transparent, I had trouble wrapping my mind around it. And what I mean by that is prayer and worship is kind of confusing to me. And we can go into that later if you like. And eventually, I was a right-wing, intense right-wing Republican. I would read the Limbaugh letter every single month.
So you would classify intense right-wing as reading the Limbaugh letter?
Let's just say I believed all right-wing propaganda. I believe the liberals were evil and going to destroy this country, and everything they stood for was an attack against America's freedoms. I bought it all hook, line, and sinker.
No comment.
Wait, do you buy all that stuff?
Huh? I'm politically in the middle. I would classify myself as in the middle. So
okay, I would say you're more like a right of center, like just a smidge right of center, and I'm like a smidge left of center.
Touche. One of these days we're gonna do a political broadcast, just you and me on
I'm
issues.
down.
So that'd be cool.
I have no problem educating you a little bit.
You very well may. So getting into your background, what was it that I guess caused you to first start to doubt, and then what was it that kind of it was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back with that?
Sure. So it actually started politically for me. I got to a point where I was confused why half the country didn't agree with me, and watching Republicans and Democrats yell at each other on Facebook and other mediums. And I started to think like, okay, maybe there is something I'm missing. Just maybe. Or maybe, you know what, I need to find out why they think that way. So I'll start listening to their news channels. So I forced myself to start listening to liberal news. And it was I was internally screaming and yelling at it constantly. But the more I listened, the more I opened up, and then was like, okay, I'm clearly missing a lot here, and I don't want to buy either side. So I tried, searching more and looking for more center news sources and reading a bit more. And during this time, I bumped into the Atheist Experience on YouTube. So I was like, what's
I've heard of
this?
it.
You've heard of it?
I've
I heard
of
you
it.
called in.
I've done both.
Yes. How'd that go for you?
Went really well.
I for those that don't know, even though Dean is pretty much wrong, he does have overwhelming, like a lot of support from the atheist community. Like every atheist I run into, they say nothing but positive things about this man.
I invite the first atheist on my channel, and what do I get? I get a roast. I feel like I'm a Comedy Central roast, but that's okay. We're having fun. All right, so wrap up. What kind of did it? What initially caused you to doubt? You've kind of mentioned that, but what was it that kind of broke the camel's back? The straw that broke the camel's back for your faith? Was it just the watching the Atheist Experience?
I would say it was specifically the understanding the arguments being used. And it was one, mainly one in particular. There was, of course, several that led to this, but it was, I don't know is not a justification to believe in God. And it was literally like a light bulb turned on. And I was like, wow, I've literally been doing that this entire time. And I'm not saying that other people are doing that. I'm just saying that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I had realized that the entirety of my life, I kept saying, well, what else could it be? Like I kept reinforcing my belief in ghosts, the supernatural, psychics, all that because I didn't have a better explanation. And when I realized I was doing that, it was actually pretty easy. I was like, I can't do that anymore. Now, of course, I did have like additional time where like, for instance, my brother did pass away when I was a Christian, but I did, in a way, grieve him a second time when I became an atheist because I had to accept that I would actually never see him in the afterlife. So, although outside of that, all of it was pretty easy for me. I was one of the lucky ones.
Just for clarification, but you're not saying that your brother's passing is what made you an atheist? Or are you?
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay.
No, that happened in 2011, and I was Christian for many years after that.
Gotcha.
It was what I was only saying is
hear the stereotype. Well, you're atheist because some tragic life event took place, and that's
the two were
abandon God.
Right. No, the two were four years apart, and they weren't tied together in any way. However, when I became an atheist, I started realizing, like, wow, I'm actually not going to see my brother again. So that was just one of the things I thought about after becoming an atheist.
Gotcha.
But no, the two do not coincide in any way.
So you would say you've been an atheist for how long?
I'd say 4 to 5 years. It's hard to say exact, but it's around that time period.
So in my estimation, and this is just my opinion, you have made a sizable impact on the atheist community in a very short amount of time. It was like one day, all of a sudden, Ethan Micheal shows up and he's doing 5 billion channels, and now everybody knows who he is. So how did you even get involved in what I would say, not just your participation in the atheist community, but your activism in the atheist community? What happened that, here's Ethan Micheal, one second. Here's Ethan Micheal not doing 5 billion YouTube channels. And then one day I'm just perusing YouTube, perusing Facebook, and boom, it's Ethan Micheal and Jenna Belk. And it's Ethan Micheal and, Vila Bianca, and it's Ethan Micheal and a whole host of people. So explain that process.
It was pretty awesome, man. Why or how? So
both. Let's go with both.
So I'm lucky, man. Like I am literally like having the time of my life. Like in 2020, I have met lifetime goals, and it's all happened within 4 months of starting my channel. It's like, dude, why couldn't I have known this sooner? So it I had been wanting to start a channel for a while, but I never felt I was knowledgeable enough or smart enough. And eventually I'm just like, I am just going to do it. But then the trouble was finding people willing to engage with a no-name atheist. Like most people on my Facebook, they wouldn't touch it. They didn't want anything to do with it. And finally, the true legend, Larry the Christian, came along. I've been friends with him for a long time, but we had never spoken. He's like, I will accept it and I'll do it. So our first two debates were pre-recorded and fortunately lost. Because
Why do you say that? Did he
oh,
did he put the Thor hammer on you?
it was just I was like taking punches. I couldn't deflect anything. Like it's almost cool, like thinking about how it was then versus now, but it's it did not go in my favor. And I was like, dude, we got to find a way to do this live.
Yeah.
And once he found StreamYard, I was like, let's do it. So we scheduled it. And the original plan was him and I would debate every 2 weeks. But then he talked about his friend Joel. So he got me Joel Sedekase and the Think Institute. And that's when I quickly learned how outmatched I was. And I should not be looking for debates because that was like Larry got me, but then Joel ran over me with a semi truck in a nice way. He wasn't mean at all.
Yeah, Joel. I don't know Joel personally, but from what I've seen, he's a genuine guy. So here's my question about that. So you have these two debates, right? And you seem to be admitting that Larry hit you, and then Joel ran over you with the Christian Academy bus, right? The Christian apologetics bus, so to speak.
Right.
So I guess my question is, that didn't impact you in any way, shape, or form as far as moving you closer, or should I say, back towards theism?
So no, and here's why.
That was my next question. Well, why not?
Yeah, so the arguments they were using weren't necessarily credible or convincing. I was just not, like, for instance, the quickest way to stump me is for you to say, well, how do you know that you know? Like, I am still learning epistemology. Like, I can't expand on that. Like, I can just be like, well, I looked at this and came to this determination. But that's where I get lost, is in those more complex things. And so, however, just because I couldn't necessarily explain it doesn't mean that I couldn't dismiss his argument as not convincing. So, for example, let's put it into magic terms. I may not be able to figure out all the aspects of how the magician sees it, but I can tell it's not actually magic, or I can at least form in a...
So you're associating Christian apologetics with a cheap magic trick?
No, that's not what I meant.
I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing. No, I got you.
So yeah, no, I just realized that I'm like, the most important thing was it taught me that I just need to come on camera and be myself, because if you watch those debates, you'll see a more serious version of me, because I was literally not trying to be me. I was trying to emulate what I saw other people doing.
Yeah.
So, and then I'm like, one of my buddies pointed it out to me. He's like, you're being too close-minded right now. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, when you originally started DJing years back, within like 6 months, you made your company huge, had all these DJs working for you because you didn't go into the norms. You didn't try and be someone else. And right now you're trying to just do one thing and emulate like one show. Why aren't you just being you? And I'm like, holy crap. And that's when I started the 50 billion shows and just started being myself on camera.
Them down to 3, right? Pared them down to 3. Okay.
Or 3 channels, multiple shows.
So let's move on a little bit. The least, I know that you don't find any of them convincing, because if you did, I'd be like, yay, welcome to theism, or at the very least deism. So, of the arguments for Christianity that you outright reject, which one do you find the least convincing?
Oh, it's my absolute favorite one. But look at the trees. Like whenever someone says that to me, like when I challenge them, say, "What's your evidence for God?" And they say, "Look at the trees. Look outside." Like that's not evidence for God. That's evidence for trees.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say the other one would be the one my stepdad said to me. So he is he's Mexican Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
and when he found out I was atheist, I'm not going to use the phrasing he used
Yeah, please don't.
because no, I wouldn't.
Okay.
But he just said, "What the heck is this no believing in God followed by a few colorful words?"
Gotcha.
And I'm like, sorry, it just cut out. What'd you say?
No, I was just waiting for you to finish.
Oh yeah, no, okay. So he said that, and I just said, well, I, I need evidence. And he's like, evidence? There's your evidence right there. And he points to my nephew, and I'm just like, that's not evidence, Dad. That's literally just evidence that my nephew was born. So I would say it's those more lazy arguments, but I don't get. There were times I would get upset with them, but then to me, you shouldn't get upset with people like that because
Mm-hmm.
they don't necessarily understand
Mm-hmm.
how poor their argument is.
Okay.
Because I didn't understand that until someone began, like I started learning critical thinking skills and applying them. So that's why I'm more patient with theists, like you. Even though I don't find your arguments convincing, I get why you feel that way. So it's easy for me to be patient.
Yeah. Well, one of these
And
days,
I
I
still have
might
hope
I
with
might
you.
formulate an argument that just does it for you. We'll
That could be
see.
it. But keep in mind that let me tell you the best way to get me to become a Christian. First, you got to get me to become a deist or theist first.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, present your argument for Christianity. But that would be your best bet, is getting me to move my needle on God first.
Well, how would you know? I mean,
Or
do what?
or even or move me on another supernatural claim like a ghost or a psychic, because then at that, if you proved like one supernatural
Mm-hmm.
claim, I'd probably be more open-minded to other supernatural claims.
Gotcha. No, I would agree that those are probably the only couple of routes that anybody could go. So what do you think's the most convincing of the ones that you reject? You
So
reject all of them. Which one do you find the most convincing?
I don't find any of them convincing so much as one phrase that makes me go like, well, yeah. And I think it's just because we're hardwired to think like that.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, that phrase, well, what else could it be? Every time gets my brain going like, I start thinking like, well, wait, what else could it be? And then I have to stop and remind myself, okay, that's not rational. Stop doing
Why?
that.
But why isn't it rational? Why isn't it rational to say to make an inference to the best explanation and say, okay, well, it, it doesn't seem that naturalism answers this question, and given the data points available, um, the best explanation would be God. That's different than saying I don't know, so therefore God. That's saying based upon the data points I have available, it seems like the best explanation is a transcendent being.
But that's not the best explanation. The best explanation right now would be, in my opinion, would just be sticking with I don't know, because
So
we have nothing throughout the entirety of history that any supernatural claim I've seen, any at all, can hold up under scrutiny.
well that's
So
well that
God is a massive
well
burden.
that raises two questions for me. One, earlier you said I don't know is a bad reason to believe in God. Well, isn't I don't know a bad reason to be a naturalist? I don't know, therefore nature, or I don't know, therefore atheism. I mean, it seems like if you're going to say I don't know is bad for being a Christian, then it seems like I don't know would also be bad for saying, well, it must be naturalism. That seems like naturalism
No,
of the gaps there.
I I don't know is a perfectly reasonable answer. I don't know, therefore God is not a reasonable answer.
So then I'm going to press you again. So why is
Sure.
I don't know, therefore naturalism a good reason?
Okay, so can you define naturalism for me first?
Right. So naturalism is the belief that the only thing that there is nature and natural processes in
So
reality. So my question is, so go ahead.
I
So
have yet to see anything that exists outside the natural world. So why would I accept something supernatural?
okay, um, the laws of logic are outside the natural world. The laws of logic can't be tested for empirically. It's not like I can look out over at this tree and say, there's the law of non-contradiction, right? Or I mean, I can't go to the grocery store and be like, hey, could you give me 5 pounds of the number 1? That's an abstract object. That's not grounded in something that you can run in a Bunsen burner or anything like that. Propositions are
I,
things that are not in and of themselves in the natural order, right?
I guess, what do you mean? Because this is where, on the philosophical side, I have trouble. So,
Right. So if all there is nature, then it seems like so then we would be eliminating supernatural areas of belief. We might even be eliminating um, things like propositions and abstract objects, because they in and of themselves are not natural, right? It's not like the tree that I see out there. It's not a thing that is in and of itself a part of the natural order or something that I can observe in nature. It's the product of um, consciousness in the mind. And even I would say consciousness in the mind. This hard problem of consciousness is still out there. Where does this thing called consciousness come from? So that still leads me back to my original question. Why is it okay? Why is it bad for me to say, all right, I don't know, therefore I'm a Christian? And why is it right? Then you turn around and say, well, I don't know, but therefore naturalism. It seems like to me what you
well,
want to say
I'm not.
is the fair position would be just to say, I don't know.
Well, I'm not saying I don't know, therefore naturalism. I'm just saying I don't know in the specific reference to God. Now, if you're saying, what are my thoughts on the supernatural? I would say I have yet to see a supernatural explanation that can be tested or proven in any way. And historically, we have no testable supernatural claims. So until such a time as we can actually investigate the supernatural, I'm going to go with naturalism.
Okay. If I bought you Craig Keener's volume on miracles, would you read it?
If you give me some time, yes.
Okay. I will get
But
you.
I gotta say, I
I'll
do
get you.
genuinely struggle when it comes to miracles.
That's fine. I'll get you Keener's. I don't know if Keener has a volume. I think it's 2 volumes on miracles, and I'll get you Lee Strobel's book, A Case for Miracles, as a starter kit. And so you can,
As a starter kit.
as a starter kit, so you can read it. So it seems like what you're saying then is, outside of a reason. Well, let me ask you this. So you don't think that the resurrection could be tested historically? You could use history to investigate the resurrection. Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna have to pause this because I got people walking in. 1 second. Sorry. So now that we got all that squared away, I do want to press a little bit about the resurrection. I mean, because clearly Christianity stands or falls on the resurrection, and I guess my question would be, if one could show that the resurrection was a historical event, would that convince you that Christianity is true?
No, that would only convince me that the resurrection was a historical event. Sorry, let me expand on that. That would
Okay.
only convince me that now, for one, that's a gigantic, like, I don't even know how we would test that, because there's, albeit except for traveling back in time and looking, I don't see any way where we could actually test it. But let's say it was. The only thing that would show is that a person named Jesus came back to life. It doesn't show anything else. It doesn't show that there's a God. It doesn't show there's no other things you can
So,
attach to that except for the fact that this person came back to life.
would you
Now
classify
we need
that
to
as a
figure out what.
miracle?
Um, okay, so we'd have to go through it, because people do come back to life all the time. So what were the conditions in which he
Okay,
died?
so if you could show that Jesus of Nazareth was a real person,
Okay.
that historically speaking he was an apocalyptic Jewish preacher, itinerant preacher that preached the coming of the kingdom and that he was the son of God, that he died by the hands of Pontius Pilate, was in the grave for 3 days, and then appeared alive to his closest followers. Um,
So
would would
a
that
few
be
things to.
would that be if you could show that historically? Would that convince you that a miracle? I'm just gonna keep it as super duper easy. Would that convince you that a miracle took place?
There's a lot to unpack there. So
How is there a
here,
lot to unpack there?
okay.
I'm just
Let me ask you
saying.
this. When we're saying if there was a way to investigate it, are you saying like we could hook him up to current medical equipment and verify that he was indeed dead? Because think about how many people were buried alive in the past. Like, someone just saying, "Oh yeah, yeah, he was definitely dead," doesn't mean he actually was. So we would have to verify that yes, his heart rate was gone. He was not breathing. For 3 days straight, he was dead, buried in a tomb or whatever. And then all of a sudden, he did come back to life. 100%. It's the same person. It's not a twin. He has no other relation. And we watched that tomb the entire time. And we saw him then come out. At that point, I would go, holy crap. Do you know what we have evidence for? That people can come back to life.
So you wouldn't even classify that as a miracle that he was dead for 3 days, and you're
I
saying
mean,
that if he
that's
was
pretty.
dead, so you're saying that if
That's
he was
pretty
dead,
miraculous.
so if you're saying that he was dead for, I'm just trying to understand you correctly. You're telling me that if he was dead for 3 days, and that he came back to life, the furthest that you could go would be saying, oh, came back to life.
Yes, I could see it as a miracle, but that would
Okay,
still be like the only thing that's really evidence for is that one person came back to life. It's not evidence for a God, that he's the son of God.
so
The only thing that speaks to is
would you
him coming back to life.
do you think that a miracle would be a divine action?
Say that again.
Do you think miracles are classified as divine actions?
I mean, if you're defining him that way, and
It's not. I'm
divine.
asking you, brother. Do you think if
Okay,
miracles are possible, do you think that they are classified as divine actions?
real quick, because I want to avoid any Dean traps here.
It's
So the
not a. I'm
definition
not. I'm
of
not.
a miracle, hang on, a surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific law. Okay, then I take that back. That would not be a miracle. That would just be, I was using it more as in that would be fascinating. Like, wow, how do we explain this? So
Ethan.
no, I can't accept that as a
Ethan.
miracle. What?
If it can't be explained by naturalistic means, it seems like the only thing left on the table is supernatural means,
That is
which would
under
be a
the
miracle, which would then entail a
So
divine
that
action.
is only if we know for a fact it can never be known, but we don't
Uh,
know. That would just say, hey, I don't know right now. He
Bro,
came back to
I'm
life.
just I'm just asking you if Homeboy was dead. Sorry, I shouldn't say Homeboy. If Jesus was
You
dead, if Jesus was dead,
just called Jesus homeboy.
I'm getting a little too flippant here. If Jesus was dead for 3 days in a tomb, let's take it off Jesus. If I was dead for 3 days in the grave and you were at my funeral, right? And then 3 days later I show up at your door and say, knock knock, hey, what's going on, man? Would you say
I'd
that a
say
miracle
that's
happened?
crazy. That's
Would
fascinating.
you say that a
But
miracle happened?
okay, if we're defining miracle as an event that is directly not explained by natural or scientific laws, then no.
See, I can't
Because
get
here's the
you. I
thing,
just can't get you
we
to
can keep
say it.
investigating it.
You just won't say it. You just won't say, yeah, that'd be a miracle. And this is what.
Because if I say that'd be a miracle, that would be dishonest of me.
Why would that be dishonest? There's
Be-
no naturalistic means that can explain the event. I'm
that
dead.
you know of.
You went to the open
That
casket.
you know
the casket
of.
shuts. You are the pallbearer. You buried me in the grave. You saw the casket close. You saw the casket go into the ground. You know for a fact that I'm still in the casket. 3 days later, I show up at your door. Knock, knock, knock. Ethan, what's going on, man? I just want
So
to
I
tell
would
you.
drag you, I would take you, I would drag you to the hospital, and I would immediately be like, start testing this man because this is freaking me out. Now, would I be more open to the possibility that, wow, this really, we could have something here? Yeah, of course.
Okay.
That would surprise the crap out of me.
Let me try
But
another. Okay, let me try another avenue of approach. So let's say we were doing your friendly neighborhood atheist live, and an audience was there, and this is something. This is admittedly not mine. This is from this is an illustration used by Michael Conan. I think it's just a brilliant illustration. And some terrorists came in, and you saw them cut my head off in front of you, and everybody rushes out. All right, everybody's out. Everybody rushes off. They cut my head off, right? And then after they have subdued the terrorists, right, I come walking out of the theater or the stadium, because your friendly neighborhood atheist is going to be huge one day, seriously. So we're walking out of the stadium, out of the Superdome, or whatever dome is there. And I'm walking up to you, and you see the scar on my neck, and I tell you a conversation that I had with one of your loved ones, right, that only you know about. Would you classify that as a miracle?
That's a tough one. Now, I guess let me so here's the thing. And you're not going to like this answer, Dean. You're really not. I would say that I don't have an explanation. And I would begin to start to wonder, like, okay, who else did I or my relative tell about this conversation? Because I have yet to see a reason where a supernatural explanation is the explanation. And as science improved, we find less and less of those explanations plausible.
So you wouldn't classify that as a miracle?
Applying a skeptic's lens, my friend, I would not.
You would just say, wow. You just say, wow, man, that's really.
I would just.
Glad you're back.
No, I would be like, dude, what is going on here? We need to look into this. We need to investigate this. How did you hear about that? And I would immediately start talking to other family members and ask, hey, do you ever know this? Did Brent, my brother, ever tell you about this? I would start going person to person until I possibly found the person.
What if it's just as it is now? I don't know anybody in your family outside. The only person I know in your family is you.
Right. So is it likely that you spoke to them?
No.
Exactly. But is it possible? Is it more possible than that you jumped to another dimension or heaven and talked to them? Yes.
But the preponderance of evidence would suggest that there's nothing, the cumulative case, let me put it that way. The totality of the case would suggest that, one, I clearly died. You saw me get my head.
Correct.
Two, I'm clearly alive, right, when I come back and see you. And three, I've clearly had a conversation with a loved one that has passed that I've never met. And you're telling me you wouldn't say that's a miracle?
No, I would say
something that can't be explained.
No. See, this is where you're being closed-minded, Dean. Why would I immediately just say, well, this is a miracle, this can't be explained? Like, that is,
Okay.
to me, if you look up the definition of closed-minded, it would put your face there right now with this answer. Like, no, the response should be, wow, this is amazing. I'm blown away. I do not know what to think of this,
So
but we need to look into
when the
this.
20 coroners come to you and they say,
Sorry.
when the 20 coroners come to you and they say, yeah, there's absolutely no way that he should have survived the decapitation, and we have no evidence of anybody ever surviving decapitation, but he survived a decapitation and there's no explanation for it. Then what do you say?
What did you do different medically? How did you reattach his head? What do we have available now versus 2,000 years ago? What's changed? Like, that's the thing, is this presents more questions. A lack of explanation does not present the answer as, or it does not.
And I know we're having fun, but to be a little bit more serious, it just seems like no matter what scenario that you could potentially paint, or it's not an analogy, but whatever picture you could potentially paint, there's no scenario in which you would say, okay, a miracle happened. So maybe I'll ask you this question: what experience would you have that you would say, okay, that's a miracle? That by definition is a miracle.
Sure. I think it's no secret that I'm probably one of the more open atheists that is genuinely looking for the truth. So if God made me in his image, he knows what it's going to take to convince me. And the easiest way for him to convince me would be like, yo, God, can I get a pound? He gives me a pound. Or he's like, yeah, hey, that Jesus dude, that was actually my son. Problem solved. I'm now a Christian. Bam. It's that easy.
How do you know you wouldn't say something like, oh, well, it's probably having a hallucination?
Okay, well, that's actually possible.
That's my point.
So short of being, let's say I am of complete and sound mind and my mental faculties are intact, and he legitimately came and gave me a pound and said, this Jesus dude is real, I would find that pretty convincing.
Okay. So you are, in that scenario, open to the possibility of miracles. You are open in that scenario
Yes.
to the possibility of miracles. So
Yes.
now that you're open to the possibility of miracles, are miracles divine actions? Are they?
I don't know. You're the expert here.
Well, I think if they can't be explained naturally, they'd be explained supernaturally. So it seems to me they would be divine actions.
And I mean, again, I don't know. Of course, that's possible.
Oh, okay. So what I'm trying to show, the trail that I've been on, is I'm trying to see if you're willing to say, all right, miracles are at least possible, and therefore, if they're at least possible, then if a miracle took place, like the resurrection, it would show that God does exist, because in order for a miracle to take place, a divine action has to take place. And in order for a divine action to take place, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. What is your definition of a miracle then?
Okay. I'll stick with the one that you've laid out, something that can't be explained by naturalistic means. Right?
Okay.
So if it can't be explained naturalistically, go ahead.
Then where in there does it say God?
Right.
It doesn't say can't be explained naturalistically, therefore God. It just says can't be explained naturalistically.
Okay, can't be explained naturalistically, but the action still took place, right?
Right.
So if it can't be explained naturalistically, then the only thing left on the table is a supernatural action.
And let's say that that's true, but even if it is supernatural, that doesn't get you to God still.
Now follow me here. A supernatural action can only occur given a supernatural being.
How do you know that, man? That's just an
That's
assertion.
just logic. That's just
No,
logic.
that's not logic.
That
That's just
is.
that's
Okay,
literally an
then give
assumption. A
me okay, then
supernatural.
give me a scenario. Give me a scenario where a
I,
supernatural action can take place without a supernatural being.
I don't. Okay, I don't believe in the supernatural, and you can't prove the
Hypothetically.
supernatural. So therefore,
Hypothetically.
but I don't know. That's the point. It's the
Okay.
supernatural, dude.
Okay. That's what if miracles are, it seems to me if miracles are possible, um then it would at least follow that the existence of God is possible. Because where there's a supernatural action, there has to be a supernatural actor.
Yeah, I
That's just
wouldn't equate the two, but I would say yes. If a supernatural action happened, it's entirely possible that said supernatural action was done by a supernatural being.
okay.
Is that better?
That's perfect. That's all I'm trying to. That's all I'm trying to get us to. So,
And oh,
and
and
the
I
reason I'm saying that, the reason I'm saying that is because if the resurrection actually took place, then that is a supernatural action that requires a supernatural actor. So in the resurrection, you have answers to questions like, is Jesus who he says he is? Because Jesus, so apparently in the Gospels predicted his death, burial, and resurrection. It answers the question: are miracles possible? Well, if the resurrection actually took place, then yeah. And I think logically it would follow that it answers the question of does God exist? Because Jesus was the one that said, my Father is the one who's going to raise me up on the third day. So it seems like that makes the overwhelming case if the resurrection took place. I'm not saying it did. I'm saying if that took place, it seems that those dominoes fall into place. The question that I have is, do you think, or do you think that that could be, or well, let me rephrase it. If it could be shown that that was a historical event, would that move you closer to Christianity?
guess would it move me closer to
Not
Christianity?
saying that you would become a Christian, but it would move the needle.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool. Well, maybe on
You
another.
just like it looked like you just got so happy and breathed
I
a
am
sigh
so
of relief
happy
when
about
you.
that. Because seriously, there have been people in the atheist community who have said, "Hey, if the resurrection actually took place, what does that do for you?" And they're like, "It doesn't do anything for me. Absolutely nothing. Doesn't get me closer to Christianity. Wouldn't make me convinced that
Well,
God exists or miracles are possible."
so okay, let me be clear. I thought you were saying if the resurrection and we accepted that it was
Supernatural event.
right, if we accepted that it was a supernatural event because we eliminated all naturalistic means, then
Sure.
yes, that
No,
would move the
that's
needle.
what I mean. If
But the resurrection in and of itself, without investigation, would not move the needle for me.
no, I'm not saying that we absolve ourselves from investigating. I'm
Okay.
saying if we were to just look at the resurrection and we say, all right, let's do a historical investigation. Here are all the hypotheses behind what could explain something like the empty tomb, or um, the disciples being willing to die for what they believe that they saw, or something like Paul's Damascus Road experience. If we eliminated all naturalistic hypotheses and the one that fit the data the best was the resurrection, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That you're saying that would move you closer to Christianity.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I seriously am. I'm encouraged by that, just because, like I said before, I've laid that same scenario out, and there have been atheists that have said, "No, it wouldn't do anything for me." And to be fair, the same thing happens on the Christian side of the house too. There are people who say, "Well, what would it take for you to not believe that God exists or that Christianity is not true?" And a lot of people say, "There's nothing that would convince me that God doesn't exist or that Christianity is not true." And I think that's just, and I'm with you. I'll use your phrase. That's just being closed minded, right?
Right.
And I've said it before. if the resurrection is not true, I'll give it Christianity instantly. If they could, or if they could show that, the universe isn't, if they could show that the universe doesn't have a finite beginning
So
in the past.
what specific argument for Jesus' resurrection is so convincing to you that it led you to believe there's a
Oh
God?
man, I knew we were not going to make the 45-minute time limit, but that's okay. So what specific argument? Well,
Yes.
I think that there
Or
are,
compelling evidence.
um, I think that there are certain pieces within the New Testament that lay out really close source material to the time of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection that the historian, Christian or atheistic or agnostic historian, they have to deal with, that isn't so easily dismissed with, I don't think is easily dismissed with naturalistic hypotheses. So for instance, you've got, 1 Corinthians 15, where verses 3 through 7, I believe it is 3 through 7, that's a early oral creed that dates to between, from what scholars seem to think, dates between the 3 and 7 years after Jesus' death. And so you have to ask the question, all right, well, this seems to be a whole host of people who are saying that, as Paul is reciting this creed, there's a whole host of instances in that creed where people are saying, or there's being reports that these people saw Jesus alive, and that's 3 to 7 years after his death. Well, if you get something historically within a generation of the event, it's good source material. So it seems to me, if this is good source material, the question then leads to, the question that you would follow up with is, so, okay, well, what's the best explanation for why these people believe that they saw Jesus?
And what is?
Now he rose from the dead.
But don't you think, like, okay, and I'm not trying to be glib here, but
No, I
I'm just
gotcha.
trying to, like, draw a comparison.
Yeah,
How many people in current times have actually believed they've seen Elvis?
right. And I think that that's a fair question, but I also think that when you look at the data, Elvis is still buried. It's not like someone walked up to Elvis's tomb and said, "Oh, Elvis isn't here anymore," and then you have all these Elvis sightings. Right? We have all these Elvis sightings, but as far as I know, there hasn't been a report that Elvis's tomb has been found empty or his casket's been found empty or even opened. Right? That's
Right,
the
but
difference
you don't
between the
think.
Elvis analogy and the incident with Jesus.
Do you believe? All right. Would you agree that people were way more gullible back then, specifically when it came to not understanding things and jumping to supernatural ideas? Like, for instance, even like magicians, they actually believed they were real wizards. But as more now you're today, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that thinks a person doing a card trick has magic.
Right, but I don't see how that impacts anything with regards to the nature of the early creed. Just because people might have been, even if I grant you that people were more gullible in the first century than they are in the 20th century or the 21st century, that has nothing to do with the truth claim that Jesus rose from the dead.
So let's say those people. How do you know that those people weren't lying? Like trying to start something or trying to start a movement. Like maybe they had great intentions. Maybe they're like, you know what? This guy was a pillar of hope and we can't let
Right.
his death be in vain. So we need to do something
I
more with
I
it. Like
think
how
that,
did you eliminate that?
yeah, so I think that would be the case, if if at least three scenarios didn't happen. One, I think their willingness to die for what they believe that they saw is a testimony to the fact that their sincerity of their belief. Once again, that doesn't mean that their belief is true, but the sincerity of their belief, right? Number two would be the conversion of Paul. Paul is unique in the sense that he isn't in on the inner circle, right? He's not one of the 12 that follows Jesus for 3 years. He's actually one in Acts 8. I don't know if you think that Acts is historical or not, but in Acts 8, he's the one that carries out a persecution against the church. So he's a hostile persecutor of the church. He goes to the leaders of the Sanhedrin and actually asks for documents that gives him the right to arrest Christians and drag them in for questioning, for persecution. So he becomes a Christian because of what he believes he saw on the road to Damascus. You've got to explain that as well. And then I think this one probably might be the more controversial one, would be the conversion of James. We see in the Gospels that Jesus' family didn't believe that he was who he said he was. Yet James, being a doubter, shortly after Jesus dies, becomes a leader in the church and even writes a letter with his name on it. And he calls himself a bondservant of Jesus Christ. He doesn't say, hey, I'm Jesus' brother. He goes, I'm a bondservant of Jesus Christ. So I think those three scenarios help me eliminate the idea that this was just some type of grand conspiracy. Plus, the fourth reason I would give would be, given how hard it is to keep a conspiracy going amongst people. We don't have any evidence that, one, they were necessarily put in a position to recant, or two, that they did recant. So without that kind of, if there was testimony tomorrow that they dug up in one of the Qumran caves or somewhere in the Middle East that said, the Apostle Peter in, 34, 35 AD, when pressed, against persecution, said that Jesus's body was stolen and buried in an alternate tomb, and they carried this out, then yeah, that would be enough evidence for me to say, all right, well, that's pretty condemning given Peter's position and role in the Gospels and in Acts. So that's how I eliminate that. Okay. I know it's a long-winded answer, but that's how I eliminate
thank you. I'm used to those philosophical answers being long, or your answers being long. It's okay, Dean.
I just want to be thorough,
No,
so that's how I
appreciate
eliminate that. It's just hard to keep a secret between two people, much less 12.
That's true, but it's also equally as easy to play the telephone game. And people will typically exaggerate those stories more and more with time, right, whether they realize it or not.
Okay, so we're moving from a conspiracy now to the telephone game.
I'm not moving. I'm just saying. I'm saying the other possibilities.
Yeah, I think that's at least possible, but I still think you run into
possible. Yes. So you're an atheist now?
No. Possible doesn't mean probable, my friend. Anything's possible. Not all things are probable.
So that brings up a more important question. You are saying it is possible that God doesn't exist then. Is that correct?
Sure. It's possible that God doesn't exist. I just don't think it's probable that he does.
Okay. So you're not actually 100% set that, yes, God exists. You are.
Now, I might get in trouble with some of my theistic friends here, but I don't know that you could have 100% certainty on a majority of things, right? You go with a cumulative case.
Can I take this quote and just be like, I got Dean. He agreed. It's not 100% possible,
but
from a Christian himself.
Sure. I don't care. That's fine.
I'm
But
just kidding.
I don't necessarily know you need 100% certainty to believe that something's true.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
Right?
It's just I'm not used to a Christian admitting that or saying that. Like, hey, I could actually be wrong.
Well, I'm sorry that you haven't had more of those experiences, you know, in your life. But I do want to address the telephone game here. So when we look at the telephone game in and of itself is designed to fail, right? Because in the telephone game, one person starts with the message and then passes it on to a second person. But the second person can't go back to the first person and say, "Hey, I missed that last part. What did you say?" Right? The design of the telephone game is you only get one crack at it. And that's why at the
Right.
end of the line, it's the payoff is that the original message is or the last message is completely different than the original. Well, when you have things like uh, New Testament transmission, or even in that culture, uh, the first several years after Jesus dies, you have people who are still alive and are able to fact check what's being said. And even the scribes, when they're copying down the manuscripts, they're allowed to go back and check the manuscript to see what was said. That's why you've got a 99% rate when it comes
Right.
to the manuscripts of the New Testament. So I see the objection and I get it, and it's a popular objection. I'm just not. Let me borrow a line. I'm just not convinced, right, that the objection holds. So, all right.
Okay, I'll take that answer.
So last question, and then we got to wrap it up. Like I said, I could talk to you forever. What would it take
You too.
for Ethan Micheal to be a Christian again?
You mean for Ethan Michael to turn into your friendly neighborhood Christian?
Yeah, turn into your friendly neighborhood Christian.
You know, it's funny. I want to address this with also another question I've received several times. First, it started with Larry the Christian. He's like, what happens if you become a Christian and your atheist channel is taken off and you're making all this money? And I'm like, well, for one, there's not a lot of money in atheism. I'm not sure if you know that or not.
Yeah.
But he's like, what would you do? I'm like, I would change the channel name or I'd create a new channel. I'm like, I'm not going to operate under a lie. He's like, so you'd really give up if all these people started watching you, you'd give it up if I convinced you. I'm like, yeah, man, like, of course. Like, I could never. I tried to pretend to argue on behalf of Christianity against an atheist, and I actually ended up taking. Yeah, I took the video down because it was like eating at me the whole time, because I felt like I was, like, even though it was practice in arguing, I felt like I was lying, and it was like weighing
God
on
was
me.
pricking your heart, like, come back.
Yeah. So, yeah, I would immediately give up my atheism if I was convinced, and I would rename my channel or create a new one and start doing what I do, but in Christianity.
Okay. Cool.
Now, what would it take? So, I would first, for one, I'm not saying Jesus of Nazareth didn't exist.
Uh-huh.
I would need to spend the time reviewing everything more and reading on it more to make the determination for myself that, okay, yes, there is enough historical evidence, Jesus did exist. And then after that, I would need to be convinced or research and or look into and find that he did indeed come back from the dead, and that he, after that, can be proven to be God's son. So there would have to be several steps taken in order to get me to Christianity.
No,
so your best bet for winning me over, Dean, would be making arguments for like deism or basic theism. That would be your best bet, is like slowly pulling me over to that more, not middle ground, but just the beginning stages of Christianity on the most basic level.
I'm bypassing all that and going straight to the resurrection.
But see, the problem with that is, like, all right, think of it like a boxing match. A lot of these hard hits you're hitting, I'm just like, I'm like ducking out of the way. You got to go with those little jabs, right? Jab.
You got to hit you with a couple jabs and then set up the left hook. Right, I got you.
Exactly.
Well, Ethan, it has been an amazing time. I always enjoy, the times where we can get together and have a conversation, whether that's on my channel, or on your 5 million channels that you have. But really, thank you for the genuine, passionate, open, honest discussion. And for those of us who may want to look at your stuff in the future, where can we find all of your stuff?
Sure. So you could actually, if you want to hear back to the interview Dean and I did yesterday, all the information's in there. Oh, wait. Dean forgot to record it.
No, I did record
So,
it, just didn't pick up the sounds.
so
There you go.
you-
Hey, like I said,
no, it's okay. I'm just giving you a hard time,
did
man.
I just want all the listeners to note that there was a bus in the background and had Ethan Michael's name on it, and he just rolled it over on top of me right there.
So you can check me out on youtube.com/YFNAtheist and youtube.com/YFNA News, and go to YouTube and search Table for Two. Every Monday at 9 p.m. Central Daylight Time, I have a dating call-in show. Every Tuesday, I have a call-in show where people can, and Dean Meadows has called in, where people can call in and talk about their supernatural, ghosts, anything like that, and listen to the opinions of a few skeptics. Although I am trying to rotate guests and bring on other Christians as well, because I think it's more fun when we have like two perspectives. Yeah. So
no doubt.
Then Wednesdays, I have my weekly roundtable. This Wednesday, Dean, you're going to love it. It's 5 Christians and 1 atheist.
Who's
so
the atheist?
I will be me, baby.
Oh,
I'll be surrounded by 5 Christians.
Okay. Well, I will. I'll be praying for that, man. I'll be praying for that encounter.
There's your chance.
So Ethan, I'll go ahead and let you go. Thanks so much, man. It has been an honor, a pleasure, and I look forward to the next time that we interact. All right, buddy?
Same. Thank you.
All right. Take care. All right, guys. Well, hey, that is the show. Once again, thank you so much to Ethan Micheal for taking his precious time and coming on to the channel for honest, open dialogue. If you want more content from The Daily Apologist, go to www.thedailyapologist.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're even on Pinterest. And if you want to help us create more content, go ahead to www.thedailyapologist.com/donate. The support that we get, the financial support that we get, allows us to buy the software, to buy the setup, to buy the camera and everything that helps us reach the lost for the glory and for the kingdom of God. So that is the show. Thank you so much for watching or listening. My name is Dean Meadows for the Daily Apologist Podcast. Remember, equip yourself to engage culture.